Welcome. Welcome to those of you joining me live this evening for this Bring On 2020 webinar. Well, three-part workshop, really. So this is something that I presented on a full-length webinar at the beginning of this month, and it was so well received. Got such great comments that I wanted to share it with you all as well. And the webinar originally was an hour long, but I definitely could have gone for longer. So that's why I'm splitting this into three parts: today, tomorrow, and Thursday at 6:30 p.m. And at the end of this, I will be sharing with you some ways in which you can take this work further if you want to, if you feel like you need a bit of assistance in pulling all of this together. It's not always easy to do our planning for the next year by ourselves. So yeah, we'll be letting you know of how you can work with me going forward to continue this work, basically. So I will crack on. Right. So Bring On 2020. So 2020 is not only a new year, but also a new decade, which is it's quite exciting. And I guess for me as well, I am going to be turning 40 in 2020 because I'm a 1980s child, 1980 child, I should say. And so yeah, it's quite a significant year. And also looking back to 2010, the beginning of this decade, is also quite a significant thing for me to do, because that was the year I turned 30. So that's why I really felt like this is a really good opportunity to look back over 10 years and see how the past decade in my life, my 30s effectively, have gone. And then for you, if you're not in that same position, it's still valuable to look back over the past 10 years and understand, what were the themes, what were the patterns, what are the resolutions that I'm always setting and never actually achieving, and look at, what do I really want to be different in 2020. And you can think about the whole of the next decade if you want. I'm not that great at looking that far ahead, but yeah, certainly to use all of this information to move yourself forward in the next year and in the next decade. So as I said, I've put a link there to the workbook for you to download. It will be useful for you to have that to work along with whilst we go through all of this. So I'm going to start from the beginning, really. And let's start by thinking about how to review the past decade and the past year, ultimately. What are the things that are going to be helpful in looking back and identifying any themes, patterns, etc., that may have gone on in the past decade and the past year. So I've split out in the workbook everything into five different life areas. So when I work with clients, I tend to work on 10 different life areas, but for this workshop's purpose, I'm focusing on just 5 life areas. So those life areas are work, home, love, health, and wealth. And then I've left an option for you to put in anything else. If there's something else that doesn't fit into any of those categories, then you can add that in yourself. But those 5 themes, I think, cover most of the areas where we set goals and where we have expectations and desires in our life. So work, home, love, health, and wealth. And category number 6 is anything else. So have a think about, maybe jot those down if you've not got the workbook for each year. Go back to 2010, 2011, etc., all the way through to 2019, and mark out, okay, for each of these 5 areas, I'm going to create some space and start to think about what happened. What happened in each of those years? Who were you? Where were you? How were you feeling? How was your health? What aspirations did you have? What resolutions, if you can remember, were you setting back in the day? This is where it's useful if you are like me and you like to write things down. You can go back through notebooks. So I had, and still do have actually, copious numbers of notebooks that last year around about New Year's I started to go through to identify, okay, is there anything of value in here for a start that I want to keep? And also then, is there are there recurring themes that that I see myself saying I'm going to work on every year, but I just never really do? Are there recurring patterns of things that happen in my life that, I think we really love to say, poor me, this is just how life is for me, this just happens this way for me, but it absolutely doesn't work like that. We are always at the cause of what's happening in our lives. And we are the ones who can make things different. It's our beliefs, it's our thoughts, it's our actions that ultimately create our lives. We need to do things differently if we want to see a different result. So those recurring themes, those recurring patterns are not an accident. They're not just your lot in life. They are due to some kind of belief, some kind of thought pattern, some kind of pattern of the way that you act, that is ultimately creating those results in your life. So looking back 2010 through to 2019, for each of those particular areas of your life, so work, to keep looking to remind myself what they are: work, home, love, health, and wealth, and anything else. Go back through some diaries, some old notebooks if you have them. If you don't have them, maybe you can look back through your calendar, or maybe you could look back through photos. So I know in my photos in iPhoto, I have thousands of photos and videos going way back. And so I can easily go and have a look and go, oh, yeah, that's the year that that thing happened, or that's the year that I was living there, or that person was living there. Other good ways of charting where you were at are things like, what job were you in? Or, if you were still at university, what, what year were you in at university? And that can start to jog your memory as to what actually was happening in my life in that particular year. Then you can start to track for each year. Just write it out. Don't worry too much about spotting the themes. And once you've got all 10 years mapped out, that's when you can start to do a little bit of an analysis, like sift and sort the data, so to speak, and start looking at, okay, in my work life, what were the patterns? What are the patterns? So do I always end up in jobs where ultimately I feel undervalued and stressed out? Or do I always end up with managers who are problematic? Do I find myself hopping from one thing to another and never really finding true satisfaction? Has my career catapulted, skyrocketed over those past 10 years? And what did I do to make that happen so that I can employ that going forward? It's not always bad themes and bad patterns, or unhealthy ones, or negative, or however you want to term it, that we're looking for. It's just patterns and themes. And you might be able to look back and say, oh my goodness, like 10 years ago, this was who I am in regards to relationships. And now I'm in such a different place. Relationships are so different for me. Or you might be able to say, actually, that pattern is still happening and I really want it to change. And that's what we're gonna look at over the course of these 3 episodes, is how can you bring about that change in your life, in those areas where you perhaps haven't managed to make the change in the past, or where unconsciously, subconsciously, you found yourself falling into the same patterns. So that is the first bit of work to do, is to do that piece of analysis, which if you've got time, you can do that between now and tomorrow. Otherwise, it's going to take you a bit of a longer time. Sorry, I have my cup of tea, my Follow Your Dreams mug. And then once you've identified the patterns, the themes, where your life has gone, it's time to start looking at, okay, was I living a life I loved each of those years? Was I living truly in alignment with myself? Did I even know who I was in each of those years? So if I look back to 2010, 2010 was before I had even contemplated, or the beginning of 2010 was before I'd even contemplated doing any work on my own self. It was the end of 2010 when I recognized I needed to go and see somebody to help me out. And that was when I first went to cognitive behavioral therapist, which I only did for a short time actually before I moved on to hypnotherapy, to cognitive behavioral hypnotherapy. And so I can see that from the beginning of 2010, the person that I am just like in such like a completely different place when it comes to personal growth, personal development, my self-awareness, knowing who I am and who my true self is. That is radically different now than it was back in 2010. So you can do the same thing yourself in thinking about, okay, was I living in alignment with my true self, and did I really know who that person was? And do I have a better idea now, or is that something that I'm still really working on, is identifying who am I really and what life do I want to live? And this is why quite often we will find, if we look back over years, we weren't living lives that we truly loved because we didn't have the awareness of who we really were in order to live lives that would be truly fulfilling. And it's through doing this kind of analysis and excavation work that we can start to identify who actually am I and what do I truly desire from my life. Then there's another interesting area to look at. So have a look again at this, what is something I said before, is okay, where do I always resolve that this year is going to be the year it's different? And ultimately it never is. I would say for me that that would generally would be in romantic relationships, where I think this is it, this is the year it's going to be different, and I find it doesn't really end up being different. And quite often that lack of change in a certain area of life will go hand in hand with a lack of attention paid to it, a lack of energy given to that particular area of your life. So for you, maybe it would be finances. You find yourself in exactly the same position year after year, or the same cycle year after year. Maybe it's a feast or famine cycle, or maybe you're just always scraping by. Or maybe you find yourself, no matter how much money you earn, you always end up getting into debt. These kinds of patterns and these kinds of areas where we're stuck with the same pattern, we can often link that to a lack of attention paid to it, a lack of energy given to it. So have a think about, well, okay, how much positive attention have I given to those areas of my life where I say I want change, but I'm not actually seeing significant change happen? And that is can be quite tough to take, because often we say we really want change in a certain area, and to really be honest with ourselves and say, but actually I haven't really made an effort to see change, I'm just expecting it to change, is quite a hard pill to swallow sometimes. Excuse me while I take a sip. And so, but it gives us information. It gives us information to work with going forward, which is, okay, let's have a look at the areas of life that have changed, where things have moved. And okay, let me see how that correlates with the amount of time and effort and energy I have given to that area of life. And so, for instance, it might be work or it might be health. There will be areas where you've seen things change. And it's interesting to note, okay, let's have a look at, let me think about, what's my frame of mind? What are my beliefs about that area of life for myself? So for instance, if I think about health and fitness. So actually towards the end of 2009 was when when I started to work with a personal trainer. But I certainly now, I feel very well equipped to work on my fitness. I know that I can improve my fitness. I know that I can change my body fat percentage. I know that I can manage my weight if I want to. I can build muscle. I can build strength. And I have a real growth mindset in that area of my life because I've been there, done that. I've proven to myself that when I put the effort in, I get the results. So what can I take from that mindset and transfer it across into other areas of life where I perhaps don't see the results that I'm getting? And yeah, what do I believe in that particular area of life, whatever that might be for you, that I don't believe in the other area of life? So for instance, in fitness for me, I believe that my actions, what I do, that they have a significant impact, a positive impact on the results that I see in my life. Now, do I necessarily hold that same belief when it comes to romantic relationships? Or am I just a little bit lost as to what positive actions can I take because there's another person involved? So how does that work? And then it's a case of, okay, it's going to be slightly different. Let me figure it out. So it needs to be more of an energetic shift than an action taking shift. Of course, you can always take different actions, but the energetic shift, the energetic shift or the energetic place that I'm in with my health and fitness can be replicated into other areas of my life. Okay, so what's the energetic shift that I need to be making here? What do I need to be believing? What energy do I need to be approaching this area of my life from? In order to yield similar results to other areas of my life. So it's a really interesting thing to get into, an analysis to get into once you have all of this information from the past 10 years of the themes and the patterns and all of that jazz. So have a think about, what areas of my life am I seeing have changed? Which ones are stuck? And why might that be? And then ultimately you get a good picture then, okay, these are the areas of life that I put a load of focus on. I clearly feel quite safe in these areas of my life, but these are the ones that I don't put any focus on, or I'm inconsistent. So consistency is really, really key when we come to making changes. That's something we'll talk about tomorrow and on Thursday. So I'm inconsistent in this area and I'm getting inconsistent results at best, or I'm getting pretty damn shitty results at worst. And so, where do I need to shift my focus? It's sometimes really tempting to keep our focus on the areas that we feel we can control, where we feel like things are going well, when actually, as long as we've put good foundations in place, we can let those tick over as long as we keep an eye on them. And the other areas are the areas where we need to give more focus, and where we're going to start to see differences from giving that consistent focus. So just check yourself. Are there areas that you're consistently giving focus to because it feels like a safe place and you feel like you're confident that you can get some results there, whereas you're not so confident in other areas of your life because it's not as tried and tested, and maybe you've got some funky beliefs around that particular area of your life. And then finally, based on all of those reflections that you've gone through and the analysis you've done of the past 10 years, what do you really want to be different in 2020? So, you can look at 2020, you can look at 2020 to 2025, you can put a 5-year plan in place, a 10-year plan, however you want. I don't tend to plan that far ahead. And what I'm going to do is split my year into 90-day chunks and do a review every 90 days. Firstly, in order to keep myself on track, because I think it was not this year, but the year before, I was going through some notebooks and found a whole heap of resolutions and intentions and goals that I had set in the January. I'd taken days over creating these things and then promptly forgotten all about them and allowed my regular habits, my everyday, my normal to continue. And this is again something we'll talk about tomorrow and on Thursday, is about how do we go about making these changes that we never seem to have made before. We have to have regular check-ins on, okay, what am I saying I want? Why do I want it? And again, all things that we're going to cover in the next couple of days. But for now, I want you to focus on the analysis side of things. So what do you want to be different in 2020? Look back at all of that analysis, all of those reflections that you have done or that you will do, and then get really honest with yourself. What do you want? Not what does somebody else want, but what do you want to be different in 2020 and beyond? What are the things that you're at that breaking point with and you think, this is no more, this can't go on anymore. I really want this to change in my life. I'm committed to making whatever choices, different choices I need to make in order for this to happen. What are those things? Start to get a bit of clarity on what your goals might be for 2020. And maybe you can start breaking it into, okay, so this is my ultimate goal. 90 days, what's achievable in 90 days? What does that look like? And break it down week by week. And then you can set some review dates so that, you know, after that first 90-day period, you can reflect and say, have I done well? Have I not done well? And you can put yourself back on track if you want. You can adjust if you need to adjust. Because this is another thing to factor in, is just because we set a goal in December or January, it does not mean that we have to stick with it if we feel like we're misaligned. This is no longer relevant for me. I don't believe in this anymore, or I've learned something about myself that means that this is not, it just isn't aligned. Or even I've achieved this already. I've done it. It happened way faster than I thought. And so I can move on and I can do something else. So the 90-day check-ins are going to be really valuable for that particular reason. So that's what I wanted to cover with you today. I'm trying to keep these to half-hour sessions each. So if we do just a little bit of a recap, the first step is download the workbook if you haven't already. And if you can't do that for whatever reason, then just map out somewhere in a notebook on a big piece of paper, 2010 through to 2019. Go through these 5 significant areas of life. So work, home, love, health, and wealth, and then anything else if you need another category. And chart what's happened, where you were, who you were, how you felt, what your desires were, what your dreams were, what your goals were, all of those kinds of things, using diaries, notebooks, old photos, whatever you feel is going to be useful for you. Map that out, and then start to look for the patterns and themes. And you can maybe start to put some categories together. You know, which resolutions did I keep? Which ones do I continue to make and never keep? Do I really want to achieve those resolutions, or are they somebody else's? And then start to have a look at, what are the things I always say that I want to change, but they never change, and how much focus and attention am I putting on them? How much importance am I giving to them? How much consistent positive attention am I giving to those areas and those things? And it's very, very likely that the less consistent you are being and the less attention you're giving to a particular area of life, the less satisfied you're going to be with the outcome, because energy flows where focus goes. So it's really key that we recognize that it's by directing our positive energy towards a particular area of our life or a particular goal that we give ourselves a much greater chance of actually achieving it, than if we just sit back and expect it to happen for us without really any kind of different input from us. And again, it's something we'll be talking about over the next few days, are choices, and, you know, expecting a different result when we're doing the same thing over and over again ultimately is the definition of insanity. So that's it in a nutshell for today. Go away, do your homework. I hope this has been of value to you. And yeah, I look forward to sharing more about this on tomorrow's session. We'll start to get into the nitty-gritty of, okay, now I've got this clarity. What about, how do I go about setting goals that are fully aligned? And how do I go about actually making those goals happen? So that's what we're going to focus on tomorrow and on Thursday. And I will also be opening up a way for you to work with me on making this a reality and making this happen for yourselves in 2020, so that you don't get to the end of 2020 and feel like you are in exactly the same position in your life as you are right now. So all that being said, I wish you a wonderful rest of your evening. And yeah, I look forward to catching up with you again tomorrow. Bye for now.